Hello threadheads! I have something spooky for you today. We've just released our Nosferatu bag. It comes in 3 sizes. This is the 6 by 9.5, the 5 by 7, and the itty bitty coin purse that fits in a 4 by 4. And I got to show you this little charm. This is from Creative Kenyobi on Etsy. I'm going to put the link down in the description. When I saw those, I knew I had to have them for this little coin purse. We also have a couple of dangles to go with these bags. We've got the coffin and the bat flying over the moon. And they just work so well with so many colors. There's one with some chains. I just attached the chain to the hardware with jump rings. Really easy. And this one is probably my favorite. So this one is got up with some spiky studs. So I'm going to show you how to make these today. I'm going to show you how to make the basic bag. And then I'm going to do a little clip just to show you how to do the studs in case you want to do that as well. So let's talk for a minute about materials. This is a turned bag. So you want your vinyl to be a little bit supple, especially for this little guy. For this little guy, you don't want to go larger than a number 3 zipper. And you want something that is fairly thin and turns easily, because this is a little tiny thing here. And you can see it's lined just as nice as the bigger ones, but it benefits from a softer vinyl that will turn easily and is fairly thin. If you want to use a thicker vinyl, you've got the option of butting the edges up against the zipper so that you don't have to fold them back. So that is one of the variations you can do. And then also this one is unlined. So you have the option of leaving the lining out if you don't want to mess with the lining. So any kind of hardware that you want to apply, lobster clasp, split rings, D-rings, that's what you're going to need. You're going to want to use a cutaway stabilizer for these. Now the smallest bag, the 4x4 and the 5x7, I've successfully used the no-show mesh with them, and that keeps them nice and supple and soft. And with the larger bag, I've used a regular cutaway. I think that this, I want to say this is a 2.5 ounce, so it's a mid to heavyweight cutaway, but it's still soft, so when you turn the bag, it stays soft and doesn't get crinkly and get creases in it. I use this because the hoop I have to use for this 6 by 9.5 is pretty big, and I feel like the no-show just kind of isn't quite stable enough in the hoop. But you may do fine with this depending on your hoop size and how your hoop grabs onto the stabilizer. You're going to need a zipper that's a few inches longer than the bag. And so you can use a number 3 on any of the bags. You can use a number 5 on the 5x7 bag, or on the 9 by 6.5. Or sorry, the 9.5 by 6 bag. So those are the things that you need for this project. I'm going to change the camera angle now, and we are going to start stitching out the Nosferatu bag. So before we start stitching, let's take a look at our color stops for this bag. So as I mentioned, this bag requires 2 hoopings, one for the front and one for the back, and that's because it has a back zipper. So we're going to stitch the front first, so let's take a look at that. And you can see that this has 8 color stops. Now, I have actually sewn some of these, as you saw, all in one color. You can choose whatever colors you want for the front, but this gives you stops so that if you want to use different colors, you're able to. So the very first one is our applique position, and that we're going to stitch on the stabilizer to show us where to put our outer material for the front. So I have hooped up some cutaway stabilizer. Now I'm using a regular cutaway because I find that the no-show mesh gets a little wobbly and gives a little too much flex in my largest hoop, and we're doing the 6x9, so I'm using my largest hoop on my Janome. You may want to use a no-show mesh, but this will work just fine. It's not crinkly, it folds nice into the bag and gives it some nice body. So I will go run color stop 1, and then we will lay down our outer material. I've stitched color stop 1 on our stabilizer, so this is going to show me where to lay down that outer material. So I'm going to mark that off on our color stop sheet and move this out of the way. I am going to use this nice leatherette. This is a My Punk Broidery leatherette, and I'm just going to lay it down over that placement stitch. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you know that I use a fair amount of tape because my fucking Janome has a very low riding presser foot, and it likes to grab onto things it shouldn't and make a mess. So I'm going to put it down in a couple places here, since this has a little bit of curl to it from being on the roll. Taking no chances. Okay, that's ready to go back in the machine. Let's take a look at these color stops. So each of these color stops stitches a different area of the design, and I'm going to use some different colors than the ones listed here because, as I said before, it doesn't matter what colors you use. This will give you the stops you need to change them if you want to. So I will be back after I stitch color stops 2 through 8. All right, I'm back, and we have our front stops 1 through 8 total, all done. I'm gonna trim a couple threads here. I like to trim while it's in the hoop because it gives you something to pull against, and you can pull it really taut and then just get in there and nip with your scissors. So there is something that happened here that I want to show you how to fix. It happens a lot on vinyl. Let me pop this out. So we can unhoop now. The front is done. And what I'm going to show you, if I can avoid knocking my coffee over, let me see if I can hold this up. Some of these stitches were a little loopy, and that can happen on vinyl, especially if the vinyl is a little bit on the sticky side. So there's an easy fix for these. I'm going to take this tape off. All right. And where I've got a loop, ooh, sorry, don't mean to make you seasick, I'm going to pull on the stabilizer. This will take care of some of them, not all of them, right? So I'm just kind of lifting that up. If that doesn't work, I've got a bunch here across the top. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to run my fingernail, such as it is, over these and see if I can't urge them to come through a little bit. Oh, yep, there's some. Let's see how that did. Sometimes it works better than other. We've got one that actually almost looks like a skip stitch. And this just happens sometimes depending on the humidity, on your vinyl, on your needle, how new or old it is. What happens is the loop that goes down does not stay where it's supposed to. So I got most of those. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to do my best here to see if I can find the magic thread to pull those to the back. And, ooh, I see it there. I'm just kind of picking at this with a pin. Yeah, I got it. Okay. This one has an unusual number of them. So there was something about going through the vinyl in that direction that my machine didn't like, or my thread didn't like, or my needle didn't like. Not quite. Right there. Ooh, I think I got it. Yep. All right, and another one. Almost. All right, I'm going to come back off camera and just do a little more cleanup on these, but you can see now it's much better. And I'm going to come through and just catch these little guys here. Sometimes it happens to me, sometimes it doesn't. It seems to be worse to me with vinyls like these that have a little bit of a sheen to them. I think they're just a little bit stickier. The patents will do this quite fairly often. Okay, so front is done. So we're going to set that aside. I'm going to hoop up another stabilizer just like this, and then I'm going to load the file for the bag back, and I'm going to run the first stop. And once I've done all that, I'll come back and show you how to put the zipper down. All right, I have stitched stop 1 for the back of our bag on stabilizer, and it gives us the outline just like the front of the bag placement stitch did, but it also gives us some guidelines for putting down the zipper. There are 2 different zippers I want to show you because depending on which you use, this process goes a little differently. So this is a zipper that you're probably going to be familiar with. This is a size 3 zipper. And I get mine from a company called Zip It on Etsy. They seem to have really good prices and really good service. I'll link them in the description. And if you have a number 3 zipper, chances are the zipper tape is either going to be slightly narrower than this distance here, or will land right on those lines. So with this narrow zipper, you just can line it up in between. You would put a piece of tape here, centered. Make sure you've got your zipper pull and your stop well out of the way. And then you would just come down. And I put a couple of vertical strips of tape here on each side, just to kind of stabilize it, so if the foot nudges this, it doesn't push it like this, right? So you're going to come down and tape it, and then tape across the bottom here. And I like to tape quite close to that stitching line, not quite on it, leave a little bit of room, but close enough that it's really going to hold it securely where it's stitching. So that's a number 3 zipper, pretty simple. Now let me show you a number 5 zipper. Now on our next episode of Machine Embroidery 101, I'm actually going to show you how to use zipper tape. This is zipper tape that I bought. Let me leave this one here so you can see the difference. This is a number 5 zipper tape, and you can see both the coils and the actual tape are wider. So we need to lay it down a little differently. I buy this by the yard or by the roll, and then I buy the zipper pulls separately and slip them on. So our next Machine Embroidery 101, I'll show you exactly how to do that. It gives you a lot of choices for using different kinds of zipper heads, and you can get more adventurous colors like this gunmetal. All right, so let's get this guy out of the way. I'm gonna pull this down a little bit, and you're gonna have to maybe envision, because there's really no way to get a good camera angle on this, but I will try. So again, we want our pull way outside the stitching lines, and we want our bottom outside the stitching lines. I would rather cut a couple inches too long than cut too short and end up with bad things happening. So what I'm going to do is, now normally I would be like leaning over this, but I'm trying to keep my head out of the camera. Okay. What I do is I fold it back, and you can see there's this center line where the zipper coil is showing through. You want that line right on that center line. And I'm going to tape it down here as a starting point. That tape's a little farther in than I normally would do, but I'm just going to let it go because I can't get quite the right angle on this with the camera there. So I'm just going to keep walking it down, and I like to put just a little piece of tape here because, again, especially with this wider zipper, if your foot nudges this, you want something keeping it from going side to side on you. Okay, I'm just going to walk it down a little further. And it may seem like I'm being kind of fussy about this, but If your zipper is crooked, it's one of the things that people are more likely to notice. Now, granted, this one's on the back, so it's not quite as big a deal as if you had a front zip bag that you were making, but I'm going to get it as close as I can. Okay, now let me move this up so you can see. All right. I think that's close enough. As my dad would say, you're not going to see that from the highway. All right, I'm going to tape across the back. And then let me show you a little trick. This works really well if you're using a no-show mess because you can see through it really well. But if you turn your hoop over, and I think it helps if you have white behind it. Let me see if this will help. You can see your stitching here, even though I was using a white bobbin thread. You can see your stitching here, and you can see the edge of your zipper, and you can see if you've got anywhere that's wildly off. To me, it looks like I might just be a little bit nudged over this way. So I'm going to double check that by doing this and see if that's a little better. I think that's better. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I've noticed this particular zipper tape that I'm using tends to be a little bit, I'm not entirely sure that the two sides of the zipper tape are identical. I'm just going to give that a little scooch over there and let's see. Yeah, I think that's going to be good enough. Might be a tiny bit this side, but we're going to go with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just don't want it wildly deviating, partly because if you do and you go the wrong direction with something, you can end up with your foot hitting it. All right, so I've got that taped down really well, and I'm going to take this over to the machine, and I'm going to run stop 2, which is our zipper tack down. I'm going to go ahead and change to a black thread so it blends in with my zipper, and then I will come back and show you the next step. All right, I've tacked down our zipper. When I ran this, the foot did sort of nudge this a little bit because I think it was just slightly off center, but I just kind of let it do it because I think it was pushing it into the center position. Let's flip it over and see. Yeah, actually, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to take the tape off now, just because once I get lots of layers on here, it'll be a pain to pull these out. And I actually had been showing you the wrong color sheet, but it was still stop number 2, so I'm going to get the right color sheet over here. I'm going to leave these down here just to keep the tail ends of the zipper behaving. And I'm actually going to do something I should have done before I tacked it down, which is I'm going to pop a little piece of tape over here. Now, my foot's not going to go up that high, but I think it's a good habit to get into to just secure hardware well away and keep it from flopping down where it could create a problem for your foot. Okay, now we've got a bunch of stops here, and they all show, in order to make the machine stop for you, I have to tell it to stitch a different color. But we're only going to use threads that make sense for what we're doing. So for this, I used a black in order to tack down the zipper because that's going to blend right in. Now, at this point, I've got a thread there that I need to cut. At this point, as we start applying the sides to this, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a black bobbin because if as we manipulate the fabric, any of the back stitching gets pulled to the front, I want to make sure that it blends in, and I'm using both a black fabric and a black vinyl. So color stop 3 is going to run down this side of the zipper, and so it's going to secure this side of the material in place. So I'm going to do a turned edge on this So what's going to happen is this, we're going to line it up here. It's going to stitch down here. We're going to flip it, and then it's going to top stitch with color stop 4. Now, if you don't want to turn your bag, let's say you're using a marine vinyl or something that's a little stiffer than this, you could always just lay it down like this, butt it up against the zipper, and run stop 3, and then skip stop 4. So that those are options that you have. But we're going to do sort of the most complicated version, which is the turned edge. Okay. So I'm going to line this up, and I'm going to actually bring this in because remember my placement line was just a little bit inside the edge of that zipper tape. I'm going to bring this in just a little bit, and I'm going to tape it along here. Now, if you're making an unlined bag, you're ready to go back to the machine and stitch stop 3. If you are making a lined bag, you're going to flip your hoop over, pay attention to what side your outer material's on, and then I'm going to take one of these smaller side pieces and I'm going to lay it face down, lining it up with the placement line. Now, this material is slightly directional. If you look at it closely, you'll see that all of the skulls are oriented, so right side up is this way. So I'm going to orient this toward the top of my bag. It would not matter with this one if you didn't get it lined up. It's not a directional fabric that would be super obvious if you didn't do that, but I'm still going to be attentive to that. So, okay, I'm going to tape right along the edge here. Now, when I slide this under my hoop, chances are this is going to want to flop. So what I do is I tape the corners to keep them from getting folded over because I do not want them to get folded over and stitched into this in a bad way. All right, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go back over. So I've got vinyl right side down on the top, lining right side down on the bottom, and they're both on the same side of the zipper. Okay, with the stitching that'll happen on this side. All right, I'm going to go stitch stop 3, and then I'll come back and show you how to get ready for stop 4. Okay, I've stitched stop 3, and that has put a seam down the side of our zipper through our front and our lining. And so the next step is to fold this fabric back down and top stitch it. But before I do that, I want you to think about something. Depending on how thick your vinyl is and how beefy your machine is or isn't, it can be worth it to trim this. My Janome does not like, you'll see when we get to the later steps, my Janome does not like a whole lot of thickness. And so I get kind of a mess on the bottom tension-wise when things get too thick. So I like to come in here and just use my applique scissors to trim this back a little bit. If I can get it started, I can kind of zip along there. Let's see here. I'm trying to keep my hair and my head out of the view. There we go. Maybe. All right, we're going to have to do it the hack at it way because I can't get quite the right angle to make it zip down there. All right. I have done better trimming jobs in my life. Let's just say that. But that's okay. This is functional, not decorative right now. Come on, you can do it. I've got the camera at a new angle today from what I normally do because it's closer to me, which is great. But I didn't realize how much of a habit I already had with it in the old position. Okay, so I'm going to fold this down I'm going to run my finger along there to kind of help crease it down. Okay. And I'm going to leave my lining where it is for the moment because I don't really want top stitching along the inside of the lining. If you forget and you do drop your lining down, it's not a big deal because you can't see it when you open the bag. It's underneath the back of the bag. But I'm going to leave my lining where it is for the moment and get this taped down. This one creases over pretty well. Some of them really don't like to, and you might need to use a little more tape. And the other thing you can do, not with your fingers, but with something like a chopstick, you can kind of, as you're stitching this, you can kind of smooth it down ahead of the presser foot. But please don't stick your fingers in there. All right, I'm going to take this over and do the top stitching, and I'll be right back. All right, you can see now we've got some nice top stitching along there. So I'm going to grab these threads, and now we're going to do this side. So since I want the fabric to end up here, now again, if I'm not going to fold it over, I can just butt it up against here and run stop 5 and skip stop 6. But if I want that folded edge, I'm going to run both stops. And I'm going to flip it this way, right? And I'm going to line it up just inside the zipper line. Now if you're using a number 3 zipper, you're going to line it up with the placement line. And if you don't know if you have a number 3 or a number 5, I think you can, look at them. Most zippers that you're going to get ready-made are going to be a number 3. All right, that's in place. I'm going to just put a dab here to keep it from flopping all over. Flip over this way. Now, had I been smart, I would have removed the tape before I did the top stitch, but I didn't. It's okay, it'll come out. Of course, it's going to be a stinker right there. Now, as you're handling this, you do want to be careful not to accidentally unhoop your project, because once this back is done, that's where you're going to assemble the entire bag, is in this hoop. So we unhooped the front, but we're not going to unhoop the back until we're all done and the bag is all together. All right, come here. I would not declare it the end of the world if I ended up with a little bit of tape buried in my bag. All right, here we go. Last one. So yeah, I should have just pulled this off ahead of time, and then that top stitch wouldn't have gone through it. So this is another reason why we are using cutaway, is because sometimes the tape is going to lift a little bit of it, and you don't, with a tearaway, it's going to get too fragile. Come on. There we go. All right. So I'm going to untape it here. And here. Okay. There we go. All right, I'm going to pull this over this way, and I'm going to tape it up out of the way here. And down here I'm going to tape over the corner so that the corner doesn't flop over and get stitched down in a bad place. All right, so we've got our first side placed here. So now we're going to place our other side. And again, directional fabric, we want it to end up like this, with the skulls, with the top of the skulls facing the top of the bag. So we're going to just flip it and line it up with that placement mark. And this time I'm going to remember to take the tape off before I top stitch. And I highly suggest that you get a tape dispenser. They're not very expensive and it makes this go a lot faster. Let's put another little one right there. I don't think there's such a thing as too much tape. All right, so that's ready to go. Both of the pieces are on the same side, lined up with the outside placement mark on this side. And to keep count here, so we did 3, 4. This is number 5. This is going to stitch this down. And then I'm going to trim it just like I did before, and then we'll flip it over and do the top stitching. So this is heading for color stop 5. All right, I have stitched color stop 5 to stitch this in place. I've trimmed it. I have flipped it over and I have removed the tape this time, but I'm going to leave this lining where it is until after color stop 6. So we're just going to fold the front down, maybe. And while I was stitching color stop 5, I thought of something that I wanted to mention, which is, although you can use a 5 or a 3 zipper for this bag, on the small one, the little coin purse, I would not use it. I would not use a number 5. I would only use a number 3. These will add a little bit of stiffness to your bag, and I think it would be harder to get a nice finish and, you know, harder to work with. So, all right, taped in place, ready for color stop 6. Okay, I am back. If you hear clicking or whining, that is Jake, our 80-pound morale officer here at Socially Awkward Stitching Society, who is distressed because my spousal unit went somewhere in the truck without him. So he is up here keeping me company. All right, I just ran stop 6, which is the top stitch, to secure the left side down. Let's flip it over, and it is time now to pull this over. If you forget to move this before the next step, you will cuss, because there is a stitch that reinforces the bottom of the zipper and you don't want this caught over there. I can tell you this from personal experience, wherein I have cussed. Shocking, I know. All right. That's Jake going downstairs. He's a big boy. All right. I think what I need to do, ooh, that came undone. Let me add that. All right, beautiful. All right, so that's all ready to go. The next stop, stop 7, is going to stitch across the bottom of the zipper with a bean stitch to reinforce it. And then it's going to stitch those cross-shaped alignment marks to match up with the front. So it'll do that all in one go. I'm going to stop it partway through the stop and use a brighter color on those crosses so that you can see them. But unless you do that, unless you stop it partway through the stop, it's going to stitch across here, and then it's going to do cross, 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 cross. So I am going to go refill my coffee cup, check on Jake, and then I will come back and run that stop, and then we'll be getting pretty close. Time to add hardware and move zippers. All right. All right, I gave Jake a couple pieces of salami. He's a happy camper. I refilled my coffee. I'm a happy camper. And I ran step 7, stopping partway to change thread color so you could see this on camera. But it put a bean stitch across the bottom of the zipper for reinforcement. And then it put these crosshairs, which we're going to use shortly to align the front with the back. Now, the next step, step 8, is going to stitch across the top of the zipper with a reinforcement. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to move our zipper head down into the center of the bag. All right, this is, so I'm going to unzip here. Now, let me show you. I'm going to go about halfway between here and here, where the top stitching ends. and that'll put it in the center. I have programmed in some extra stitches that will keep your machine, if you have to err in any direction, you can err a little bit on the lower side of halfway. Those stitches should help keep your machine from crossing where you've got the hardware positioned. I want to stress to you though, if you haven't done a lot of in the hoop bags, and you don't know how your machine behaves with moving around the design, that the very first time you run this, you really should be at your machine ready to hit the stop button in case it does something unexpected. Chances are that since I've optimized this for my Janome, which wanders all over the fucking place, chances are that it'll be fine, but it's not the time to go get your wine glass refilled. You notice I refilled my coffee before this step. Okay, so I've unzipped it. Now, you need to tape up here or your foot is quite likely to grab that open zipper and run with it. Okay, I even like to put a little tape on the vinyl there to avoid catching those ends of the vinyl that are sticking up a little bit. All right, next you are going to put a piece of tape over your zipper pull. I'm going to fold that up like that, just to keep it as small as possible and as out of the way as possible. All right, now the at one point your zipper is, or your foot is going to travel, if it's a Janome anyway, who knows? I mean, there's so many different machines, but it's likely to travel over this area. So I like to put some additional tape down here. I know this seems like overkill, but once you had your foot hit hardware and make you sad, you will want to do this as well. Okay, so I've got that all positioned. So stop 8 is going to put a placement stitch across here. If you want to, you can put a tab of vinyl in that location. So I don't have anything cut down to the right size. So if you want to, I'm not going to on this bag, but if you want to, you would just, this is where the top of the bag is, where that top stitching ends. You're going to cut yourself a tab like this. Okay, I cut it crooked, but you'll get the idea. One reason to put a tab up here is it gives you something to hold on to when you're unzipping the bag, but it's not necessary if you don't want to do it. And you could also put hardware here, although I think with the larger bags it works better to put them on the sides. Okay, so if you want to, after we do step 8, you're going to put this down, and then step 9 we'll stitch it down to tack it down to the bag. I'm not going to do that this time, just wanted to show you how that works. I'm going to go stitch stop 8 and 9, and then we'll come back and talk about the placement of the hardware on these edges. Right? Okay, I have stitched 8 and 9, which took care of the top of the zipper here. You notice how, because I taped this all down, how the zipper coil stayed neatly side by side, so that'll make a neat closure when the zipper's fully closed at the top. So our next stop is stop 10, and that's going to come over here and make a placement mark to help you place your side hardware. And I'm going to change the color again. You would want to do this with something that blends with your material, but I'm going to do it with something contrasting so that you can see it while I show you on camera how we're going to put the hardware on. So I'm going to go stitch stop 10, come back, put hardware on, and then 11. So we're going to apply the hardware one side at a time rather than placing both and stitching both. That results in less movement across the zipper, and it also it ensures that if you place both and while your machine is moving around, something gets jostled, you don't get things out of alignment. because I had, that was a request from my testers who said, you know, I tape my stuff down really well, but by the time it got to stitch it down, it had moved. So we're going to do one side and then the other side. All right, I stitched stop 10, which gives us this placement line for our first bit of hardware. I decided on this bag I'm going to put a D-ring on each side. So, and I'm going to use a gunmetal color similar to the zipper. And you can use fold over elastic, you can use ribbon. I like to use strips of vinyl most of the time, unless the backing is like shockingly weird colored and will show. So I just cut my strip of vinyl so that it is just going to fit nicely inside the ring. You don't want it folding up too much and you don't want your ring flopping and slopping around on it. Okay, so there's that. And this is where you start eyeballing a little bit. Okay, I find it helpful if I line myself up with the, there we go, that's about right. I line myself up with the placement line so I can see when I'm at a right angle with it. Now, this is as wide as I would probably use on this bag. It's a 1-inch D-ring, and probably a 3/4 would have been plenty. So with a 3/4, you would be able to see the ends of the stitching there and use that to help align what you're doing. Now I'm going to slide this up. You need to leave a little bit of room here so that when your foot comes through and stitches, it doesn't crash into anything. Okay, so I'm going to position that about like that. And don't worry that this tab is over long here. Now, did you notice that I left, I put them a little staggered? That's so the tape will grab both the top and bottom of that loop. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back over and stitch stop 11, and that's going to tack this down. I'm also going to stitch stop 12 while I'm over there, which will be the placement for this one. But before I do anything, I am going to secure my hardware. All right, back in a moment. All right, step 11, tack down my hardware. Step 12 gave me my next alignment mark. So I'm going to find the little D-ring that has already escaped me. There it is. All right, and I'm going to thread it on here and do the same thing. It's not perfectly perpendicular. That's all right. Get it about the same amount out from the mark as the other one. When your bag's in use, you're not going to notice little differences like this because it's flexible. Okay. Tape it down. Tape down your hardware. And off to run step 13, which will tack down the hardware on the right. Oakley dokley, that was actually step 13 that I ran. I think I said 14. And so that tacked down our hardware here. The next step is going to sew the front to the back. So the outer front to the outer back. So I'm going to go ahead, I leave all my hardware taped up until I'm done because I do not want that flopping around in there and getting in the way of the presser foot and the needle. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this tape off here. Yeah, I'm going to leave that in place. I'd rather have to pull it off later and have it be a little tricky than pull off too much tape and have things end up where they don't belong. Okay, and so now we're going to use these alignment marks to line up our front and our back. So first thing we're going to do is get this guy over here. And I'm going to cut off the excess stabilizer around the piece of vinyl just so that I can manage that bulk better in the hoop, because I've got to tape it down in there. So it doesn't have to be perfect, we're just getting rid of the excess. All right. And come on, you. Ha! There we go. All right. I think I'm going to need to move this camera a little bit, so there'll be a quick video edit while I slide this over. Hopefully my floor is not too dirty. Okay. This is how I do it. You may find a better way for yourself. I find this helpful to be able to get the two pieces lined up really straight. So I have my hoop with its ass end on the table and its other end hanging off over the void, okay? And grab my pins here. I've got my top, and I'm going to flip my top over, and I'm going to put a pin through the very center of the top two crosses. Okay, just like that. Ooh, I want one I can see. This is how you're going to line it up. Now I'm going to take, so right, pretty side down, right? Right side down. This is the top. And I'm going to try to line it up. I'm going to poke it in the very center of that cross. Okay. Push it part way down. Do the same thing over here. I have these nice long patchwork pins which really work well because they're so long I can kind of get them started. Now I'm going to pull them both straight down and keep the pins straight. Okay. So those are lined up. I've got the pins pulled very straight down. You can end up, like if you have the pin, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but if you have the pin at an angle, you can get movement this way. So you want them straight down. And once it's lined up, then you want to put a piece of tape. Whoop, see? I moved it. Okay, put a piece of tape at the top to kind of hold it there. Again, more tape is better than less. And if you have trouble with your tape sticking to your stabilizer, which can happen with some stabilizers, you can run it up onto the hoop to give it something to grip onto. This particular cutaway that I've got, which I think is by World Widener, if I'm not mistaken, is pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to leave those pins in, knowing that they're going to get laid down. I'm going to flip my hoop around. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom two. Hopefully you're not seeing my squirrely hair. There we go. Okay, there's one side. Oh, I used a white one. Well, you'll get the general gist here. I've got these set so that they stitch a couple times in the center to give you a nice hole to run through. All right, now I'm going to find the center of that one and poke the pin straight down, straight as possible, like so. Yas. There it goes. And same thing over here. Oop, that didn't go straight down. Sometimes you can feel like that the pin makes a zigzag while it's in between vinyl and stabilizer, and then you got to kind of back out and do it again. Okay. And remember, when you embroider anything, things pull up a little bit, and so sometimes you're going to have to, when you pull down on those pins, you're going to have to kind of hold them straight while you tape to keep everything in alignment. Okay, now show you why I left those pins in on the other side. Because my tape came loose. That is not shocking. Okay, I'm going to push that down. Now, I'm going to pull this up, push these guys back down. Okay, so all 4 pins are headed straight down at this point, and that's when I'm going to add I'm using my tummy as a propping point. And just to give the sides a little bit of security over here. Now, check on my pins. Are they reasonably straight? Yes, they're reasonably straight. Okay, I'm going to take them out. And then I'm going to set this back down on the table, and I'm going to give the tape a good bit of this action. Alrighty. Okay. Now, will this be absolutely perfect? No. Because you're going to have distortion in part from your hardware in here. And if you use, as I have on some of these, if you use lobster claws, you're going to even have more of a lump here. But this should get you pretty close to having your stitching line following this original placement stitch. Okay. All right. I'm going to go stitch stop number 15, which will join this front to the back. And then we have one more stop. Sorry. Stop number 14. I'm getting ahead of myself. So this will be stop 14 will attach the front to the back. Okay. Okay. I've stitched stop number 14, which stitches all the way around here. Now, if you were doing an unlined bag, you'd be almost done. You would want to back up and run stop 14 again so that this is reinforced. Then you would turn your bag through the zipper, which is halfway open, remember, so you would just take the tape off, slide the zipper down, and turn your bag. But we're doing a lined bag, so we've got one more step. All right, well, actually a couple more steps. Now, do you see how goobery this is right here? That's because we were approaching the limits of my Genomi's power. And it has kind of a conniption when I get to too many layers of vinyl, zipper, etc. So that was part of the reason I did that trimming earlier before I flipped the fronts down, the front vinyl pieces down, was because the more layers with my Genomi, the pissier it gets. Okay, so before we put the lining on, we need to open this area up for the zipper. Okay, so I've tried using my applique scissors, and I actually think these little thread nippers work better. You want to be careful that you don't cut the edge of the lining. And I'm going to have to, this is probably not going to be my world's neatest. There we go. If you can get it started, you can glide it. If your scissors aren't sharp enough to do that, you need to have them sharpened. Because being able to glide them instead of cut is half the battle when it comes to this kind of in-hoop project. Okay, now you can see that there's a little skim of the stabilizer showing because remember we're stitched along this line. That's okay. This is going to be facing toward the inside of your bag. You're never going to see this part. Okay. See there. Okay. We're going to skim down this side. If you if you are able to slide it like that too, whew, that was kind of messy. Let's try that again. You're less likely to cut the edge of your fabric, which is something you don't want to do. Okay, that's better. It doesn't have to be, you know, perfect. I just don't want the zipper getting caught in that. feel like I need one of those standby signals, technical difficulties. Okay, there we go. Maybe if you see my technical difficulties, it'll make you feel better when you encounter them, because everybody does. All right. Okay, zipper revealed. Okay. Now, here's our top, because it goes on like this. Here's our top. And I'm going to take the only part of my lining that's really going to show, unless you really look around in the bag, which is this big piece. And I've got it facing the correct way. Top of the heads are up toward the top. And I'm going to flop it over and lay it down on top of the whole works here. And I'm going to tape it on the 4 corners. Since it's on the bottom, I don't have to worry about really the edges catching on anything, but I have had, when I've taped edges, I've had corners flop and end up in the middle of a stitching line where they don't belong. So, all right, we are going to go stitch number 15, take a hit of coffee, and then I'll be back to show you how to trim and turn the bag. Okay, I can hear what you're saying. You're saying, Kris, there's one more stop. There is one more stop, but the job of that stop is to keep your foot and needle from sailing into the center of the bag where your zipper pull is, okay? So never, never, never stitch stop 16, okay? That's just there to keep your machine from crashing on the rocks. So I've stitched 15, which goes around like this, and it does it twice for extra reinforcement. It didn't stitch here, which leaves us an opening. And we need this opening to turn our bag. Yeah, see how cranky Sinead gets about these? She's just, she turns into such a bitch. But that's okay because I have a more powerful machine on order. All right, so I'm going to show you, we're going to pop, now we're done. We're going to pop it out of the hoop. And let me show you how to trim it and deal with all the tape and the rigmarole. I keep kicking the camera as I walk by to get to the machine, so I'm trying to make sure y'all can still see. All right, so you do not need to remove all the tape. I tend to, just because it annoys me. Where you do want to pull the tape out is anywhere that it's up close to the stitching line. So this is when I pull the tape from the bottom of the zipper and the top of the zipper. And that'll be okay. There's a little tape there. This is when, if you have a little pair of tweezers, and you could probably take those off sooner, but I'm really almost superstitious about removing tape over zippers, just because I have some sewing machine and zipper related trauma. There we go. Okay. Come on. All right. And I'm going to pull this off. I don't know why I have a carabiner out here. We don't need that. All right, let's pull this guy. Ooh, there we go. And one more. Okay. And then this is all, these are all on the outside, so we're good. So we are going to trim every edge except this one. We're going to save this one for last, okay? Because we have to do something a little special here to have room to close our bag. And for all of you who are saying, oh my God, am I going to have to actually sew something? No, you're not. I have a plan. All right, I need my little ruler because it's easier to maneuver. So you've got all this hardware in here. So if you try to set your ruler there and do that, and you can cut this by hand if you want, but I'm lazy, so I'm going to use a rotary cutter. But I'm going to hold it out to the side of the bag instead of lapping it over like this, because this is no good. That is going to end up with a trip to the emergency room at best. Okay. This way too, if your ruler slips, you don't cut into your bag. So I'm going to guesstimate an 1/8 of an incheth. Is that a thing? And for our wise folks whose, I should say, our folks whose wise countries actually went to the metric system, that'd be about 3 millimeters. I'm not resentful about that. Not at all. All right. And that's done with a new rotary blade. Might have to hit it a couple times. That's a lot of layers there. All right, got that one. Okay. That could be a little closer. It'll be all right because this is the bigger bag, but especially on the littler bags, you probably would want that just a smidge closer. But I'm not going to try to fight that right now. All right. And then this, remember, we've got the hardware loops. Did I mention I go through a lot of rotary cutter blades? Okay. I'm not entirely sure that's the safest way to handle things. Now, I've got a zippered across. Let me show you what I'm gonna do here. First, I'm gonna try to get that fucking tape out of there. Maybe. Come on. Here we go. Oh my goodness, look at that. I really did it up here. These tweezers are really good for cutting jump stitches because I can grab little itty bitty threads with them and pull up, but they're like the best eyebrow tweezers I ever found, and so they've gone to the sewing room, of course. But they're also pretty darn good for this. All right, I've got that loose enough that if there's tape on the in here, I'll be able to get it out. So I like to cut my zipper ends a little bit wider, so about 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters. Let's see how you can see this. Okay. Then I'm going to come through. Yes, that was dangerous. Let's not do that. Some of this is, you know, I think I'm going to cut that. Here, let's cut that with scissors. That's just looking like a problem waiting to happen. So I'm going to come in here and trim closer than my zipper. Yep, there we go. All right, come on. Okay, and then same thing back here. Can trim closer. Remember, this is all on the inside of the bag, so if it looks like, you know, chopped meat, it is okay. All right, I got 2 more edges here. I honestly think it would have taken less time if I maybe had just cut it, but now that I'm doing all this embroidery, these quilting rulers got to get some love somehow. All right, bottom, same as we did on the top. Oop, that was probably a really unhelpful shot. Oop, tape. Okay. Zipper. All right. You could singe the ends of the zipper, but I'm not too worried about it since it's all encased. However, if you're making an unlined bag, you probably should. So let me show you. Somewhere I have my stolen cigarette lighter from Holly. It has made it into my sewing room as well. Oh, for Pete's sake. I am not a Capricorn. She is. Okay. So I'm just gonna, like I said, I wouldn't worry about this if you're lined, but if you're not lined, this zipper tape stuff really ravels. Just try not to catch yourself on fire. Okay. Right. Now, this edge, if we flip it over, we can see this edge is where we're going to turn. We need to leave a flap sticking out that's about a 1/2 inch wide instead of going super close. So I'm going to do this, then I'm going to twist and cut out like that. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. Oops, that was a little close. Goodness, Kris. Okay, I'm going to flip it over because I'm a righty and this makes more sense to my right-handed brain. All right, now just kind of rough cut that. Okay, now I'm going to cut this one out more like that. Okay, okay, but we're not going to do that with all the layers. We're going to turn it over. We're going to flip this back. And without cutting the fabric that we have folded back, because that would be bad. In fact, I've got a better idea than holding it there and cutting myself. Really, you know, my job is half done if none of you end up in the hospital or emergency room. Okay. You can trim that even a little closer if you want, but you just want to get, again, ignoring the unsafe behaviors. Oops, sorry, you want to see that probably. Okay, good enough. All right, so now you have the bag stitched, flap, and the lining. Before we turn it, we're going to do this magical thing called clipping the corners. If you took home ec, you probably know about this. Actually, that really betrays my age, doesn't it? It wasn't even called home ec by the time I was in it. It was family living or some shit. All right, there we go. So all of those corners you're going to clip. These I kind of just dip in and then back out just to take the bulk out for when that turns around. Luckily, they're fairly forgiving. All right. Now the fun part. These can be, you gotta be patient with this part. It takes a little bit because this is a whole lot of material that you're forcing through here. And I might have, oh, it's salvageable. I think yeah, I cut that way too close. Be careful cutting up in here. So I just got a little tear there because I cut way, way too close. All right, I think I can make it work though. The good news is with my videos, you often get to see me do the things that I tell you not to do. So you know what they look like and you don't have to do them yourself. All right. Now, this is where it gets a little weird because this is, I actually made this opening a little larger than I had it initially when I designed this because this was just ridiculously hard on the first go round. Okay, getting that out there. There we go. Look at that. All right, now you don't have to do any more pushing, pulling, whatever, because we're going to turn it again. So now that we've got it turned that way, reach in here and grab get your tape off of your zipper. And then slide the zipper down. If you have a locking zipper, you're going to have to flip the tab up to get it to slide. Okay. Now we're going to do this. There we go. Okay, I'm going to untape my hardware, because that can actually, these hardware jobbies can actually help you kind of pull these edges out. Okay, now poking out the corners. Yep, there is a little tape showing there. Yeah. It's a job for my tweezers later. Okay. This is a point turner specifically. I have used the ends of my scissors. I've used this point turner. I have used a hemostat. I have even used a screwdriver. It doesn't matter so much what you use as long as it's not something that's going to poke through your bag. So something this sharpie pointed, just be cautious. Don't go crazy with it, okay? Vinyl, unlike fabric, you know, fabric you can just kind of really kind of reef on it and it turns out pretty easily. Unlike fabric, vinyl it needs to be coaxed, and especially if the vinyl is a little sticky, it can stick to itself when it's right sides together, and you just have to kind of work it gently to get it convinced that it needs to let go. Okay. And so I will use whatever point seems to work at the time. I really like the screwdriver effect, actually. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty good. These guys are a subtler edge, so they just kind of come out by themselves usually. Now, again, the more supple your vinyl, the easier this is going to be. You could use marine vinyl, but I think you're gonna get a little blunting in your corners if you have something that is a little stiffer. All right. Okay, I think we're pretty good. So yes, that tape will come out later. I'll have to futz with it and see if I can pick it out of there. So do as I say, not as I do. All right, so then the other thing I kind of like to do is just roll the seams both ways, kind of crease it, roll it that way and crease it, just to kind of get those edges out where they belong. All right, so there's our bag. What about our lining? I promised you no sewing. I'm going to keep my promise. All right, this is a roll of double-sided permanent tape made for fabric. So you're looking for the words permanent and double-sided tape, okay? I got this at Joann's, so it's pretty easy to find. They only had this width. It actually comes in a 1/4 inch width, so I cut it down. And this stuff is hella sticky, so please, please, please don't use your good scissors on it. I used a rotary cutter that I use for paper, and yes, that was probably not the safest thing to do. Okay, so I'm going to pop this back out for a minute, and I'm going to fold my edge down along that stitching line. Okay. And I'm going to tuck this in, and I'm going to just kind of get it, let's see here, just trying to get it flat. You know what, I bet. Let's get it all the way out, entirely turned. Okay. Whoop. Sticks to everything. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay it on this side. I've seen people try to like kind of just stick it in between them, and I've tried that, but I don't think it works the best. So kind of right along that stitching line. And I'm going to cut, get the crappy ones here. I'm going to cut this off. I don't want to use my good scissors on it. And I had a pair of bent, believe it or not, bent applique scissors that I would use for this if I had them, but I threw them away. All right, so. Come on. Well, fuckero. I may have to reshoot this whole segment if I can't get this going right. There we go. Ooh, got it. Okay. Ta-da! All right. So now, without endangering my fingers, I'm going to turn this in. God. You guys, just get a fucking needle and thread and do it. Trust me. But if you really don't want to, here's what you can do. Okay. If I make it look hard enough, will you hand sew? All right, there we go. Nope. Oh, I got it. Look at that. Look at that. Okay. Once you get it started, it's not too bad. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, this is allegedly permanent. I can't promise that it is, but it is an option if you don't want to come through and slip stitch that opening. Okay? All right. So now we're going to put everything back the way we had it. Sorry for the little bit that took. I hope you didn't have anything important happening that I made you late for. Okay. That was sarcasm. All right. There we go. And it's all done. Now, so for some of you, it's all done. Go, be free, have fun. If you want to see how to put on the studs, I am going to tag that on right after this. So if you want gothy studs, stay tuned. Okay, so this is a little addendum to the main part of the video to show you how I attach the studs. So I've got a stud kit here that I think this was an Amazon purchase, and it just has little screws that go through and screw into the various types of studs. So what I did is I laid them out to see kind of what spacing I liked and how to keep the spacing fairly consistent. And then I used a millimeter ruler to mark the approximate location. I'm going to center them between these lines with the punch rather than trying to get it perfect. And most of these are about 2 centimeters apart with a little variation. But remember, this bag is not rigid, it's soft, and so if there's little differences, you're not going to be able to see them. So now that I've got them marked, I'm going to get my hole punch and start punching some holes, and then I'll show you the rest of how to finish the bag. Okay, I have my hole punch, and I've been comparing the little screw to the size of the punch. They do come with a cutter, but this is going to be faster. Might be a little tricky to get that far in, but I'll show you how I do that. So the screw is about like that one, so I'm going to set that one in the cutting position. And then I'm going to move these off and start cutting. Start punching holes, that is. I'm just using my pencil marks to kind of get me in the right spot, and then I'm centering it between the 2 purple stitched lines. Okay, so I've got the holes punched. That guy's a little off. They look fairly even. I'm going to go ahead and punch that out just a little bit so I can squidgy that one down. Oops, I've got the wrong kit, but this is what I really need. It's just an awl so that I can poke through here and make sure that these are open all the way through. And it looks like they are. So we've got just these little flaps of stabilizer. And they won't hurt anything. Yep, they're all cut through. Perfect. Okay. So now we're not putting these on yet because we certainly couldn't stitch that close. We're going to finish up the bag and then I'll show you how these go on. Okay, so I've got the bag constructed and turned, and if you don't have a lining, it's super easy. You just pop the screw through from the inside and screw on the stud. But what if you have a lining, like I do? So what I do is I'm just going to take, I've got an awl from another kit that I have, and I'm going to make sure my lining is smooth behind, and then I'm going to poke through the lining. And the key here is we don't want to cut a hole in the lining so much as we want to separate the threads. Okay, and I'm going to keep my fingers there so I know where I am. And then I'm going to find the spot that I went through the lining. And I'm going to, there we go, almost, push the screw through from the back. Now see how it's grabbing the fabric right there? That can happen if I don't quite get it centered on the hole that I made. So what you can do, besides drop the screw, find that spot. Poke it through. And since this didn't quite, I need other scissors. These will work. Since that didn't quite line up the way I needed it to, I'm going to use these snips and just run them around it. That just snips the tiniest hole in your fabric. It's going to be pinched between the stud and the screw. So you don't need to worry about the, and you're not going to wash this because it's vinyl, so you don't need to worry about the lining fraying. And then tighten it up with the screwdriver and on to the next one. So I think this is easiest if you poke through the hole, flip it over and sort of fold that inner layer out, and then pinch it with your finger. That keeps track of the lining where you made your little poke through, and it's still going to come through, because your awl is not as, my awl anyway, is not as big as this screw. It's still going to come through with some fabric attached to it. But then you take this and clip it a little and then just force that down. Whew, there we go, just like that. And I'm going to screw this on. I want to make sure I get it on there. And then I think what I'm going to do is just keep going, and then at the end I'll tighten everything up with the screwdriver that came with the kit. I hope this has been helpful for you. Remember that when you download any of our designs, you get detailed instructions with lots of photos that take you step by step through the project. You can find our designs at our Etsy shop, which I've listed below, and you can find our Facebook group, also listed below. That's where we announce new releases, provide discounts, and have a lot of fun. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. Until next time, happy stitching.